There are two kinds of men who lose their houses: the kind who gamble them away, and the kind who let someone else tell the story of who owns what. I have spent my entire adult life making sure I was neither. But I will tell you this. It is a strange thing to stand in your own hallway at 6:47 in the morning, holding coffee you made in a kitchen you have maintained for 14 years, and hear your wife explain to her sister that the house is basically hers already. My name is Dale Brennan. I am 49 years old. I have been a project manager at a mid-sized commercial construction firm in Raleigh, North Carolina for 23 years. I am not a loud man. I do not raise my voice at dinner. I do not slam cabinet doors when I am upset. I have never once in my marriage thrown something across a room or raised a hand, or even raised my voice past a register that a normal man uses when he is telling someone to please pass the salt. What I do is notice things. I keep schedules. I track deliverables. I know at any given moment exactly where every document is that has my name on it. It is the project management background. Everything is a deliverable. Everything has a due date. Everything has an owner. Welcome to Quiet House Stories. Get comfortable and remember the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. My wife's name is Claire. We have been married for 17 years. We have 2 children. Our son, Nolan, who is 22 and living in Charlotte working his first job out of college at a logistics company where he earns $41,200 a year and calls me every Sunday to tell me he thinks the transmission on his Honda Civic is making a sound, and our daughter Abby, who just turned 16 and is the kind of girl who carries a novel in her backpack, even though she has a phone in her pocket. I bought the house on Ridgewood Lane in 2009 with money. I had saved over 11 years of living below what I earned. The mortgage was in my name. The title was in my name. I paid it off in 2019, 6 years ahead of schedule, with a lump payment of $47,312 I had been setting aside in a separate savings account since 2014. Claire knew about the house. She did not know about the savings account. I want you to understand something about that. I did not hide the account because I was planning anything. I hid it because I grew up watching my father lose everything twice. Once in a business that went under in 1991 when I was 14, and once in a divorce from his second wife where her attorney found every dollar he had and made a legal case for half of it. My father told me once, sitting in a rented apartment in Greenville with nothing but a card table and a television on the floor and a window that looked out on a parking lot where his truck used to be, that a man should always know exactly what he owns and exactly where the paper is that proves it. I was 19 when he said that. He was drinking instant coffee out of a styrofoam cup because the movers had taken the mugs. I have never forgotten that image. Not the words. The styrofoam cup. I keep a fireproof lockbox in the back of my closet, behind 2 boxes of old tax returns and a plastic bin of Nolan's Little League trophies that I have been meaning to give him for 3 years. Inside that lockbox, the original title to 412 Ridgewood Lane, the paid-in-full mortgage letter from 2019, the savings account statements, the deed of trust paperwork, a copy of my father's discharge papers from the Navy, which have nothing to do with any of this, but which I keep because they're the only document of his that I have left. Everything in that box has my name on it. Everything is filed by date. I check it once a year, on January 2nd, the way some men check their blood pressure. It is not paranoia. It is maintenance. So when I stood in that hallway on Tuesday, October 8th at 6:47 in the morning, and I heard Claire say to her sister Vanessa on speakerphone, "I'm your wife," of course I get half. Probably more. I did not feel surprised. I felt the way you feel when a load-bearing beam test comes back exactly the number you calculated. You are not happy about it. You are not sad. You are just correct. And correctness, in my experience, is the loneliest place a man can stand. Claire had been talking to Vanessa about the divorce for weeks. I knew this because I am a man who pays attention to patterns, and Claire had developed a new one. She waited until I left for work at 7:15 every morning, and then she called Vanessa from the kitchen on speakerphone every single day between 7:20 and 7:45. I know this because on September 23rd, I left my laptop charger in the bedroom, and came back to the house at 7:32 and heard the tail end of a call. Claire was in the kitchen with the phone face up on the counter next to the fruit bowl, and Vanessa's voice was coming through the speaker clear enough that I could hear her from a hallway. They were talking about a lawyer named Dietrich. Dietrich had told Claire that North Carolina was an equitable distribution state, and that the house, even if it was in my name alone, could be argued as marital property if Claire could demonstrate contribution to its maintenance or value. She could not demonstrate that, but she did not know that yet. Dietrich, apparently, had not asked the right questions. I should tell you about what I had been seeing before the speakerphone call, because the call was not the beginning. The beginning was August. In August, Claire told me she wanted to take a weekend trip to the coast with Vanessa, Emerald Isle. I said fine. She had gone to the coast with Vanessa every summer for 6 years, and it had never been anything other than what it was. 2 sisters, a rental cottage, a bottle of wine, and a beach. She went on Friday, August 16th. She came back Sunday evening, August 18th, and something was different. Not in her face, not in her voice, in her paperwork. Claire had started leaving legal pad notes on the kitchen counter. Lists of things, household items, furniture, appliances, which room certain pieces were in. I saw the first one on Wednesday, August 28th, sitting next to a fruit bowl on the kitchen counter. The same spot where she always put the mail and the grocery list and the school forms Abby needed signed. This note was different. It listed the living room couch, the dining set we bought together at Furniture Warehouse in 2012, the patio furniture, and the bedroom suite. Next to each item, she had written a dollar amount in her handwriting, which is rounded than mine and uses larger numbers. The couch, $1,200. The dining set, $3,400. The bedroom suite, $2,100. The patio set, $850. At the bottom of the page, she had written a total I will not forget, $14,750. And below that, underlined twice in blue ink, the word equity. I picked up the note. I read it. I read it again. I put it back exactly where it had been, next to the fruit bowl, oriented the same direction, and I walked out to the garage. I stood at my workbench for 20 minutes. I did not touch anything. I just stood there with my hands on the edge of the bench and looked at the pegboard where my tools hang, each one on its hook, each hook labeled in my handwriting from 2010 when I organized it on a Sunday afternoon while Nolan, who was 6, sat on an upturned bucket and handed me hooks one at a time, and I did the math, not the math of the furniture, the math of the marriage. 17 years, 2 kids, a house I bought with money I saved before I met her and paid off with money she never knew existed. A career I showed up to every day at 6:30 in the morning and came home from every evening at 5:45, regular as a tide table. A woman I had loved in a way that men my age love, which is to say, quietly, consistently, without performance, with pot roast on Sundays and oil changes on her car every 4,000 miles and the gutters cleaned every November without being asked. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Claire had gone to the coast with her sister and come back making an inventory of my life in dollar amounts on a yellow legal pad next to the fruit bowl in my kitchen. The truth is the only currency I have ever traded in. And the truth, standing in that garage on August 28th with my hands on a workbench and the smell of motor oil and sawdust in the air, was that my marriage had become a line item on someone else's balance sheet. Take a second with that. I called Catherine Watson on September 16th. She picked up on the second ring. Catherine Watson has been practicing family law in Wake County for 19 years. Her office is on Glenwood Avenue, 2nd floor, above a sandwich shop called Murray's that has been there longer than she has, and makes a roast beef on rye that I've been eating since 2019, when she handled a property dispute for my firm, and I started keeping her card in my wallet. She is a small woman with reading glasses she wears on top of her head, and a leather-bound notebook she writes in with a pen that probably costs more than my watch. She does not waste words. She does not reassure you. She tells you what the law says, what the paper says, and what your options are, and then she sets the pen down and waits for you to decide. I sat in her office at 4:15 on a Monday afternoon, September 16th, and told her everything. The legal pad notes, the furniture inventory, The speakerphone calls I had not yet heard but suspected. The trip to the coast with Vanessa. The word equity, underlined twice in blue ink on a piece of paper next to the fruit bowl in my kitchen. I told her about the house. I told her about the mortgage. I told her about the savings account. I told her about my father's apartment in Greenville and the styrofoam cup and the card table. Catherine listened without interrupting. She took notes. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me over the top of her glasses and asked me 3 questions. The first was whether I had made my decision about the marriage. I said I had not decided anything yet. I was gathering information. She said that was the right answer. The second was whether I understood that North Carolina's equitable distribution statute could, in theory, reach the house. I said I understood the theory. She said the theory was weaker than Claire's attorney probably thought. The third question was whether I had the title. I had the title. I have always had the title. Catherine and I met twice more. September 23rd at 9 a.m. to review my documentation. Title, mortgage payoff letter, saving statements, property tax records. She said the chain of ownership was as clean as any she had seen in 19 years. September 30th at 4:30 p.m., she presented me with 2 documents, a revocable trust instrument naming my 2 children, Nolan James Brennan and Abigail Claire Brennan, as beneficiaries and myself as trustee, and a quitclaim deed transferring 412 Ridgewood Lane from my name into the trust. She explained that timing mattered. Once Claire or her attorney filed anything, the window would narrow. What I was about to do was legal, documented, and defensible. It would also change everything that came after. I signed the trust instrument on September 30th at 4:47 p.m. in Catherine's office. She witnessed it. Her paralegal, a woman named June who had a photograph of a golden retriever on her desk, notarized it. The quitclaim deed I took home. I placed it inside a manila folder. I put the manila folder on top of the refrigerator. It sat there for 9 days. Claire did not notice it. She did not notice it because it looked like every other folder I bring home from job sites, beige, unremarkable, with a rubber band around it. It sat 6 inches from her head every time she stood at the counter making coffee. Then came Tuesday, October 8th, the speakerphone call, the hallway, the coffee, the words basically hers already, coming through the kitchen like a weather report about my own life. I did not confront her. I did not walk into the kitchen and correct the record. I finished my coffee. I rinsed the white mug. I set it upside down on the drying rack the way I have done every morning for 14 years. Handle facing left, because that is how it fits in the rack without touching the other dishes. And then I reached up and took the manila folder off the top of the refrigerator. Let me tell you about the drive to the county recorder's office, because that is what the story is really about. It is not about Claire. It is not about Dietrich or Vanessa or the yellow legal pad. It is about a man sitting in a truck in his own driveway at 7:38 in the morning with a folder on the passenger seat and a decision already made, and the minutes between the engine starting and the truck moving. I sat in my truck for 6 minutes before I left. The engine was running. The radio was off. It was October, and the windshield had that thin film of condensation that comes with the first real cold morning in North Carolina, when summer finally gives up the argument and fall walks in without knocking. I watched the condensation clear in slow lines from the defroster vents, starting at the bottom of the glass and working up in streaks, and I held the steering wheel with both hands at 10 and 2 the way my father taught me when I was 15 in the parking lot of a Baptist church on a Saturday morning. I did not pray. I do not pray about paperwork. But I thought about my daughter. Abby was upstairs asleep. She sleeps with one arm hanging off the side of the bed, and her phone plugged in on the nightstand, and a stuffed elephant she has had since she was 4 that she would deny owning if you asked her in front of her friends. The elephant's name is Mabel. Abby thinks I do not know this. I know this because I have heard her talking to it at night when she thinks her door is closed all the way, and it is not, and I am walking past on the way to the bathroom, and I hear her say, "Good night, Mabel," the way a person says good night to something they trust completely. I thought about the shoes she leaves by the front door in a pattern that is so specifically hers. Left shoe always slightly behind the right, toes pointed inward, laces untied, that I could identify her by her footwear alone in a lineup. I thought about the fact that I was about to do something that would change the shape of her life, and that she would not know about it for weeks, and that when she found out she would have questions I was not yet sure how to answer. I thought about my father's card table. I thought about the styrofoam cup. I thought about the number $14,750 written in Claire's round handwriting on a legal pad next to the fruit bowl. I thought about the word equity, underlined twice in blue ink. And then I thought, the house is mine. I saved for it. I signed for it. I paid it off. I painted the porch in 2013 and 2018. I replaced the gutters in 2016, the water heater in 2018, and the roof in 2021 at a cost of $11,247 that came from my checking account and nobody else's. I hung every tool on that pegboard myself on a Sunday in 2010 while a 6-year-old boy handed me hooks. The house is mine, and my children will have it, and no legal pad next to a fruit bowl changes that. That is the part they do not tell you about being the kind of man who handles things quietly. The handling is the simple part. The quiet afterwards. The 6 minutes in the truck with the defroster running and the windshield clearing, and your daughter asleep upstairs with a stuffed elephant she thinks is a secret. That is where all the weight lives. I put the truck in reverse at 7:44. I drove to the Wake County Register of Deeds office on South Salisbury Street. I parked in the visitor lot at 7:53. The building opened at 8 o'clock. I sat in the truck for 7 more minutes. A woman in a gray coat walked past my window, carrying a paper bag from the bakery down the block. A city bus stopped at the corner and let off 3 people. I watched them all. I counted them. I do not know why. Sometimes when you are about to do something permanent, your mind catalogs every small thing it can find, as if it is building a record of the last moment before the line moves. At 8:03 I walked in. The floor was that government building tile, beige and scuffed. At 8:09 I was at the counter. The clerk's name was Mrs. Davenport. She had reading glasses on a beaded chain and a small potted succulent on her desk. I handed her the quitclaim deed. She reviewed it page by page. She asked me to confirm my identity. I showed her my driver's license. She asked me to confirm the property address. I confirmed it for 12 Ridgewood Lane, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27609. She stamped it at 8:14. I signed it at 8:16 with a ballpoint pen chained to the counter. By 8:22 it was recorded. Receipt number 2024 R10847. I am not a dramatic man. I do not make speeches. I do not slam doors. I do not need the last word. I do not need anyone to see me do what I do. I signed a piece of paper in a government building on a Tuesday morning and walked back to my truck with nothing in my hands but a receipt and a ballpoint pen I had forgotten to leave on the counter. I still have that pen. It sits in a cup on my desk, at work, next to 3 others. It looks like any other pen. It is not like any other pen. The quitclaim deed did one thing. It transferred the house on Ridgewood Lane into the trust one had established with Catherine Watson 8 days earlier. The trust was for my 2 children. The house was no longer in my name in any way that a divorce attorney could reach. It belonged to a trust, and I was a trustee, and the beneficiaries were a 22-year-old young man in Charlotte who worries about his Honda's transmission, and a 16-year-old girl who was probably just waking up upstairs and reaching for a phone and saying goodnight to an elephant she thinks nobody knows about. Catherine Watson had told me during our final meeting, "Dale, the house was yours before the marriage. You paid it off with funds she cannot trace to joint accounts, and the transfer predates any filing. The paper is clean, and the timeline is clean, and you did nothing that a reasonable man with 2 children and a paid-off house would not do." She straightened the pen on her desk. "The only question is whether you can sit across from Claire at dinner tonight and not say a word about it. I could. I have been sitting across from people and not saying what I know for most of my professional career. Job sites teach you that. You learn which cracks in a foundation are structural and which ones are cosmetic. You learn that the structural ones do not need to be announced at a meeting with coffee and donuts. They need to be documented, quietly, with dates and photographs and measurements. And then the documentation does the talking, and you do not have to. I went back to work that morning. I ate lunch at my desk, a ham sandwich from the shop on Hillsborough Street. Same as every Tuesday, with a bag of chips and a bottle of water. I answered 14 emails. I reviewed a change order on the Garner Road project that was $6,700 over the original estimate. I drove home at 5:42, and Claire was in the kitchen, making pasta with the radio, playing something I did not recognize. And she asked me how my day was, and I said fine. I did not look at the top of the refrigerator where the folder had been. The folder was in my truck in the glove compartment with the recorded copy and the receipt. That evening I sat in the garage for 20 minutes after Claire went to bed. I was sitting on the metal stool next to my workbench, the one with the wobbly leg I had been meaning to weld for 2 years, looking at the pegboard and listening to the house settle. I was thinking about the fact that the hardest thing I had done was not signing the deed. It was putting the pen down at 8:16 and driving to work and eating a ham sandwich and answering 14 emails as if the morning had been ordinary. Patience is not the absence of action. It is the discipline of acting and then being still. Most people can do the first part. Almost nobody can do the second. 3 weeks passed. 23 days of ordinary life. I went to work. I came home. Claire made dinner, or I made dinner. On Sundays, I made pot roast with cornbread the way I have since Nolan was small. Abby did homework at the kitchen table with her earbuds in. The yellow legal pad with the furniture inventory disappeared from the counter at some point. The speakerphone calls to Vanessa continued every morning. I stopped listening. I had heard everything I needed to hear on October 8th. On Thursday, October 31st, Halloween, which is a detail I remember because Abby had carved a pumpkin the night before and left on the front porch with a candle inside. Claire's attorney, the one named Dietrich from the speakerphone calls, pulled a title on the house as part of standard pre-filing discovery. I know the exact date because Catherine Watson called me at 11:47 that morning and said, in her measured Glenwood Avenue voice, "Mr. Brennan, opposing counsel pulled the title this morning. He now knows about the trust. I expect you will hear from Claire by this evening." I thanked her. I set my phone on my desk. I looked at the pen in the cup, the one from the county recorder's counter, and I waited. I heard from Claire at 6:12 that evening. She was standing in the kitchen doorway. She was holding her phone in one hand and a piece of paper in the other, a printout from Dietrich with legal letterhead at the top and a Wake County seal watermark on the second page. She looked at me the way people look at a building when they realize the foundation has shifted, not with anger, not yet, with recalculation. "When did you do this?" she said. "October 8th. I said. "October 8th. She repeated. She said it slowly, as if the date itself was a document she was trying to read. "The morning you told Vanessa it was basically yours already," I said. "I was in the hallway." She sat down at the kitchen table. She put the paper face down. She put her phone face down next to it. She placed both hands flat on the maple surface. The same table I bought at an estate sale in 2011 for $475 and refinished myself, while Nolan sanded the legs with a piece of 220 grit. And she looked at it for a long time. "You planned this," she said. "I documented what was mine." I said, "That is not the same thing." She did not respond to that. She picked up her phone and went to the bedroom and closed the door with the careful quietness of a person who is saving the louder version for later. I heard her call Vanessa. I did not listen this time. I went to the kitchen, rinsed my coffee mug, set on the rack, handle facing left, and sat down in a chair Claire had just been sitting in. The seat was still warm. The weeks after that moved the way legal proceedings move, which is to say slowly and expensively and with a great deal of paper. Dietrich filed the divorce petition on November 14th. He contested the trust transfer on the grounds that it was a fraudulent conveyance. Catherine Watson responded with the title history going back to 2009, the mortgage payment records, the savings account statements from 2014 through 2019, the property tax records, and a clean chain of ownership demonstrating the house had never been jointly titled, jointly financed, or jointly claimed on any tax return in any way that suggested shared ownership. Every receipt, every canceled check, every bank statement, filed, dated, organized, tab with color-coded dividers that Catherine's paralegal June had prepared with the precision of someone who has done this before. The project management background. Everything is a deliverable. Everything has a date. Everything has an owner. Judge Raymond Holt Wake County Family Court, reviewed Catherine Watson's documentation over 3 sessions in December. On December 19th, at 2:15 in the afternoon, he issued a preliminary ruling that the trust transfer was valid. The house was separate property, and it was not subject to equitable distribution. He said it in 6 sentences. Claire's attorney appealed. The appeal was heard in February. It was denied in a 4-page opinion that Catherine photocopied and placed in a manila folder in her filing cabinet. She told me she keeps a drawer for cases that remind her why she went to law school. During all of this, the filing, the motions, the hearings, the appeal, my daughter asked me one question. She was sitting at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning in November, eating cereal with the spoon balanced between bites on the rim of the bowl, the way she has done since she was 9, and she looked up from her book. She was reading something with a blue cover and a dog on the front, and she said, "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" I said yes. She said, "Are we going to have to move?" I said, "No, this is your house. It has always been your house." She looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded once and went back to her cereal and her book. She did not ask anything else. She is 16. She is old enough to understand that some questions have answers that are enough for right now, and that more will come later when the time is right and the words are ready. Nolan called me on Thanksgiving Day from his apartment in Charlotte. I could hear a football game on a television behind him. He had heard from Claire about the trust. He said, "Dad, did you really put the house in a trust for me and Abby?" I said, "Yes." He was quiet for 8 or 9 seconds. Then he said, "Thank you." And then quieter, "I'm sorry you had to." And that was the most either of my children has ever said to me about any of it. And it was more than enough. I want you to know something about Claire, because this is not a story about a villain. This is a story about fear and what it makes people do when they do not deal with it honestly. Claire's mother lost her home when Claire was 11 years old. The landlord changed the locks on a Tuesday afternoon in March of 1994 while Claire was at school. She came home to a padlocked door and her mother sitting on the curb with 2 garbage bags of clothes and a cardboard box of kitchen things, a colander, 2 pots, a set of plates with flowers on the rim. Claire stood on that sidewalk in Durham, North Carolina, in a blue backpack and sneakers she had outgrown by half a size, and watched her mother cry. Her mother never recovered. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Durham until she passed away in 2017. She never owned property again. Not a house, not a condo, not a square foot of anything with her name on a deed. That image lived in Claire for 38 years. It shaped everything she did. It shaped the way she talked about the house on Ridgewood Lane, not as our home, but as a structure, an asset, a thing that could be taken. It shaped the way she called Vanessa every morning and rehearsed what Dietrich had told her about equitable distribution. It shaped the yellow legal pad next to the fruit bowl. She was not trying to steal from me. She was trying to make sure she never sat on a curb with a cardboard box and a colander and a daughter in outgrown sneakers. I understand that. I understand the way you understand a crack in a foundation. You see where it started, you see how it spread, you see the load path it followed to the structure, and you still have to fix it before the building comes down. I understand Claire completely, and I still file the deed, because understanding someone's fear does not obligate you to let them take what is yours. Compassion and compliance are not the same document. I can hold both truths in the same hand. I can see why she did what she did and still know that what I did was correct. And if that sounded a contradiction, then you have never been married to someone whose wound was older than your relationship and deeper than anything you could reach. Catherine Watson told me once, over coffee in her office after the February ruling, that most of her clients wait too long to protect what they have built because they confuse protecting their assets with abandoning their families. She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup, the same white ceramic cup she uses every time I am there, with a gold rim that is mostly worn off from years of use. And she said, "Dale, you did not abandon anyone. You filed a piece of paper. The paper says what it has always said, which is that you built this and it belongs to your children." I thanked her. She nodded. She went back to her files. The golden retriever in June's photograph watched us from the next desk. It is now April. 6 months and change since the morning I drove to the county recorder's office on South Salisbury Street with a manila folder and a ballpoint pen, and a decision I had already made in a garage on August 28th while looking at a pegboard and smelling sawdust. The divorce is proceeding. It will be final by summer. Claire moved into an apartment in Cary in January. A nice place, 2 bedrooms, 2nd floor, clean and bright with small balcony that faces a row of dogwood trees that will bloom soon. Nolan helped her move the furniture on a Saturday. I did not attend, but I wrote a check for first and last month's deposit, $3,150, and left it in an envelope on the kitchen counter with her name on it, because that felt like the correct thing to do, and because I am not interested in watching anyone sit on a curb. Not Claire. Not anyone. Not ever. My daughter still lives with me in the house on Ridgewood Lane. She still leaves her shoes by the front door in that pattern. Left shoe slightly behind the right. Toes pointed inward. Laces untied. I see them every morning when I come downstairs at 6:15 to make coffee in the white mug and stand at the kitchen window and watch the dogwood in the front yard, which is finally starting to bloom now that April has arrived and the last cold morning has come and gone. The trust is filed. The house is secure. My children will inherit something that cannot be taken from them by someone else's fear or someone else's attorney or someone else's inventory on a yellow legal pad. And I sit on the porch some Saturday mornings with my coffee, the same white mug, the same house, the same porch chair I bought at the hardware store on Glenwood Avenue in 2011 for $38. And I think about my father in that rented apartment in Greenville with a card table and the television on the floor and the styrofoam cup. I think about a man who lost everything twice because he did not know where the paper was. And I think about how he sat a 19-year-old kid down at that card table and said the only useful thing he had left to give: know what you own and know where the proof is. I know where the paper is. Dad, I have always known. Some mornings that thought is the heaviest thing I carried down the stairs. Not the triumph of being right. Not the satisfaction of having won something. Just a quiet, permanent weight of knowing I was correct. About the house, about the paper, about the kind of man you have to become when the person you love starts counting your life in dollar amounts, and wishing, honestly and deeply, and without any reservation at all, that I had not needed to be. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Quiet House Stories. I will see you on the next one.